Dr. Death Takes a Holiday is a reference to the 1924 Alberto Casella play La Morte in Vacanza, or Death Takes a Holiday, a dramatic fantasy in which the personification of death becomes human to understand our fear of death. It's also the swan song for Jake Weber's Dr. Matt Crower. Dr. Crower is still poring over evidence in the Merlyn Temple murder, no doubt spooked by the events of the Plague Sower. Merlyn's injuries aren't consistent with a shovel injury, as Lucas's initial report states. Someone broke her neck.
I thought you had your hands full with medicine.
Lucas blows him off and says that Gage must have hit her with a shovel and then broke her neck. But Deputy Ben's bad poker face leaves Matt dissatisfied. Lucas inquires about the state of Matt's mental health, since he was locked away last episode, and tells Deputy Ben to schedule a competency hearing. Outside, Lucas stops to talk to some pretty young girls while Matt spies horror royalty Veronica Cartwright aiming a gun at Lucas. Matt wrests the gun away from her, saving an unwitting Lucas's life. That's quite the cold open. Results show that the woman is dying of a brain tumor, and she's unremorseful about trying to kill Lucas Buck. At the school, Dr. Billy explains the importance of flu vaccinations and gives Selena a shot to demonstrate. Even the 9-year-olds can see the moon eyes between them. We catch up with Judge Streeter and his wife Charlotte. Charlotte has gambled away their portfolio and can't afford to pay for their son's private school. Unsurprisingly, Lucas shows up to ask for a favor. Have Dr. Matt committed. The judge is cool to the idea of jailing dissidents, a term that recalls the theme of life under fascism that we've talked about before.
That's what they used to do in Russia. You got a dissident making trouble, and then you have him declared insane, and then you cart him off to an asylum.
Lucas alludes to Charlotte's bad luck streak, and if you've been following American Gothic up to this point, you know exactly where this is headed. Speaking of life under fascism, the cancer patient, Mrs. Smith, explains her reasoning to Dr. Crower.
It's 1928. You meet this bohemian student in a cafe. This impudent little twit will one day exterminate 6 million Jews. What do?
Crower is skeptical that Lucas is Myrtle Beach Hitler. This triggers an argument between psychology and philosophy on the nature of evil. Mrs. Smith argues that psychology can't explain Hitler or Charles Manson, both of whom she sees as otherworldly evil. And she would know evil, because, as she states in The Mother of All Bombshells, she's Lucas Buck's mother. Loris Holt loans Dr. Matt a book on the occult and warns him that the greatest trick the devil and Kaiser Soze ever pulled was convincing the world that they didn't exist. In other words, Dr. Matt shouldn't ever think he's got Lucas figured out. Charlotte's luck is still terrible until Lucas shows up and provides her with some much-needed moral support. Of course, part of it may be her terrible poker face, which would make Deputy Ben look stoic. Of note, Charlotte's poker mates include local North Carolinian character actor Bill Roberson, last seen in a bit part in Forrest Gump.
We were sitting next to a millionaire!
And Nancy Saunders, a B-movie starlet in the heyday of RKO Studios, who had not acted in nearly 40 years prior to coming out of retirement for this brief role.
The guy could pull up a chair and join you good people.
Lucas, if you set in, anybody with diddly for a brain will be out of here.
Charlotte wins her money back and gets ready to leave, but Lucas encourages her to stay and ride out the hot streak. Charlotte jumps in for an unfathomable $50,000, hoping to pay off all her debts and pay for her son's college.
$5,000, that's egg money, Charlotte.
What do you suggest?
Add 0. Go for glory.
In one of the series' gut punches to the audience, Charlotte loses, even with 4 jacks, and we get a shot of Lucas's most evil glare so far. No wonder this is Gary Cole's favorite role. Nurse Sarah interrupts Matt's occult studies to tell him about the curse of room 105. That was the room Caleb's mother leaped to her death from right after Lucas went in there. Ever since, the room has been cold. Supernaturally cold. Mrs. Smith and Dr. Crower have another argument over the utility of killing. Fortunately, Crower puts his foot down before they approach the trolley problem. She tells him that the demonic evil is trying to reach Caleb Temple through Lucas Buck, and she accuses Dr. Crower of cowardice if he can't put a stop to it. Selena offers to play doctor with Dr. Billy, but he tells her he wants to take things slowly. Lucas is waiting nearby to remind Selena that she's a worthless tramp and that Billy thinks so too. He told him so. As Lucas's plots go, the Regina George route is rather clumsy. Selena finally stands up for herself and kicks him out of the car. Judge Streeter returns home and finds Charlotte, her wrist slit in the tub. He finally relents and agrees to sign Lucas's papers. A dozing Dr. Matt relives his life in Trinity and rejects Gail's attempt to get him out of the house in favor of obsessing over apocalyptic imagery. More moral philosophy as Mrs. Smith compares her brain tumor to Lucas, both malignant clumps of cells after all. Lucas appears after Matt leaves and offers her the chance to kill him. She throws away her shot this time, and dialogue reveals that, of course she's not his mother. She was his first lover. The fact that Veronica Cartwright is only 7 years older than Gary Cole should have probably tipped Dr. Crower off. Mrs. Smith, or Angie as Lucas knows her, explains that she wanted Matt to kill Lucas. The next thing you know, Angie crashes through the window to her death right in front of Dr. Crower. Just like Caleb's mom.
But if you're gonna kill yourself by jumping out of a window, don't you open it first?
Deputy Ben arrives to serve the papers on Dr. Matt, only to find that Matt has adopted the crazy man's wallpaper motif. Selena overhears Lucas badmouthing her to Billy and severs ties with him more directly. Ben, Billy, and Gail arrive just in time to stop Dr. Matt from killing Lucas, but we get the sense that Lucas wasn't all that worried in the first place. Ben takes Crower out in the woods Miller's Crossing style, but offers to let him go. Instead, Matt refuses and agrees to be locked up.
I came here to make a difference.
Lucas visits to gloat, and Dr. Matt promises that more people will rise up against Lucas and overthrow him one day.
When you'll be stopped. You will, they'll get you.
And we're out, and so is Dr. Crower. This marks the end of Jake Weber's run on the show, but it's a hell of an episode to go out on. Dr. Death Takes a Holiday has a lot to love about it, including Veronica Cartwright's vitriolic philosophizing about the utility of murder.
I've committed my life to preventing death.
But you'd kill the malignant cells in my brain to save me, wouldn't you?
Cartwright is a longtime actress in the horror genre, including several episodes of The Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock Presents. She also worked with Hitchcock on the big screen as Kathy Brenner in The Birds. She's undoubtedly best known for 2 roles in the horror genre, Alien, and the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Her work here lifts the role beyond the screeching nag the character could have easily fallen into, and imbues it with personality and empathy. It's easy to see why Dr. Crower fell for her plot.
If I pull the trigger on Lucas, I'm no better than he is.
If you don't make a stand, you're worse.
As maligned by the network as Jake Weber was, he really nails the character in this episode. Although Matt's conversion to attempted murderer is abrupt in the episode, it makes sense in the context of what he's been through and what he's seen over the season. He just needed someone to activate it.
He's a channel for demonic evil.
Which is the irony because the repeated allusions to Hitler and his influence on the German people mirror Angela and Matt's relationship in this episode. And that brings us to a difficult conversation on morality and ethics. Like The Plague Sower, Dr. Death Takes a Holiday is a morality play, with each character representing a philosophical point of view on whether one should kill Hitler before he commits genocide. Dr. Matt, who represents modernity, rationality, and logical positivism, believes that Lucas is simply a corrupt Southern sheriff, a relic of old antebellum. For him, evil isn't something that exists, but a series of actions that we as society have come together to categorize as evil after the fact. Angela represents more concrete ideals of good and evil. Lucas is inherently evil. Kill Lucas, and the evil is stopped.
But you've no right to take a man's life.
The laws of man don't apply to him.
It's a comforting black and white view of the world. But of all people, Gail is the one who gets it right. And she's not even in the argument.
It's not going to change anything.
That's the position of John Prorios, professor of philosophy at the University of Chicago, who points out that killing baby Hitler doesn't address the systemic problems that led to his rise in the first place. It doesn't wipe out the anti-Semitism, and it probably doesn't even prevent the Holocaust. You'd just have killed a baby for no reason. The thought experiment assumes that the Holocaust would be prevented, and that's just something you can't know. Maybe the Holocaust still happens, but with a more competent leader at the helm. Would there even be an Allied powers if the Nazis stopped at Poland? Given the events of the ensuing 80 years, it's unlikely they would intervene to stop a genocide they saw as an internal matter, as horrifying as that thought is. Lucas may be evil, but his death, like pulling a knife out of a stab wound, may cause even more harm. And that's something we're going to have to deal with as the show ramps up to its conclusion.